Before we get started, hit the comments and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is over there. Whether you're catching sunrise in Nairobi, burning midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to hear from you. Don't just watch silently, let me know where in the world you are. Now let's dive into the story. The termination letter was still shaking in Alara Quinn's hand when the hospital doors hissed shut behind her. Not slammed, sealed. Like an airlock. Like she was no longer allowed to breathe the same air. The white envelope had no warmth, no apology. Asterisk budget cuts. Restructuring. Effective immediately. Asterisk after 12 years as a trauma nurse, after nights sleeping in supply closets and days missing birthdays, she was dismissed in under 2 minutes by a man who couldn't meet her eyes. Her badge was clipped off by security. Her locker was emptied into a plastic bag. A woman she once trained looked away as Alara passed. That hurt more than the firing. Outside, the late afternoon sky over Dry Creek, Nevada burned copper and red, the desert wind dragging dust across the parking lot like it was trying to erase her footprints. She started walking because standing still felt worse. Her old Subaru had been repossessed last week, another quiet failure stacked neatly inside her chest. The road home cut through scrubland and rusted fences, heat shimmering above the asphalt. Alara walked with her shoulders forward, like she was bracing against an invisible storm. Her scrubs were still on, blue, faded at the knees, now stained with sweat and shame. Cars passed without slowing. A pickup honked once, sharp and careless. She didn't look up. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She ignored it. People only called when they needed something from her, and today she had nothing left to give. The desert swallowed the sound of her footsteps, and for the first time since nursing school, Alara wondered if she had wasted her life being useful to everyone except herself. Half a mile past the cattle gate, the air changed. Not cooler, heavier. The wind died mid-gust. Alara felt it before she heard it. A low thrum, distant but growing like a giant heartbeat. She stopped walking. The sound deepened, split into two overlapping roars. Helicopters. Military. She knew the difference. Years in trauma teach you to identify the shape of danger by sound alone. The sky darkened as dust lifted in a widening spiral. Alara shielded her eyes. 2 helicopters dropped fast over the ridge, matte black, no markings she recognized, rotors chopping the air into violent pieces. They flared and landed hard on the dirt road ahead, gravel snapping against her legs. Doors slid open. Men jumped out in coordinated motion, boots hitting ground, rifles low but ready. Someone shouted through the rotor wash, voice amplified and urgent. Asterisk, asterisk, where's the nurse? Another voice echoed it. Louder. Asterisk, asterisk, we need the nurse. Now. Asterisk, asterisk. Alara froze. Her heart hammered so hard it felt borrowed. She looked behind her, then down the empty road ahead. There was no one else. Dust stung her eyes. The men scanned the horizon like hunters who had finally found a trail. One of them locked eyes with her. He raised a hand, signaling stop. Not threat, not greeting. Recognition. As if she were exactly where she was supposed to be. Alara's plastic bag slipped from her fingers and spilled across the dirt. Scrubs, a stethoscope, the termination letter fluttering like a wounded bird. The helicopters idled, impatient. And in that roaring silence between breaths, Alara realized this wasn't a mistake. They weren't asking if there was a nurse. They were asking where she was. The last time Alara Quinn had heard helicopters this close, she had been knee-deep in blood and rain, her hands shaking as she clamped an artery with fingers already numb. That memory surged now, sharp and unwanted, as the men advanced through the dust. Her mind didn't ask why, it asked how fast. How fast could she run? How fast could she think? The answer to both was the same, not fast enough. She lifted her hands slowly, palms open, a reflex burned into her by years of trauma bays and worse places. The man who had locked eyes with her stopped 3 steps away. His face was young but worn, eyes ringed with exhaustion. He didn't point his weapon. He pointed at her chest. Name, he said, voice tight like time was bleeding out. Alara Quinn, she replied, surprised her voice didn't crack. I'm a nurse. We know, he said, already turning. You're coming with us. The words should have terrified her. Instead they landed with a strange clarity. Purpose. Motion. She followed because standing still had already broken her once today. Inside the helicopter, the smell of fuel and metal wrapped around her. A medic shoved a headset into her hands. Put this on, he said. We don't have long. The doors slammed. The rotors climbed. The desert dropped away, shrinking into lines and shadows. Ilara's pulse steadied as the ground vanished. In the air things made sense. They always had. The flight lasted minutes that felt like hours. No one explained. No one apologized. A tablet was shoved into her lap, grainy video, a body on a gurney, chest rising unevenly, blood blooming through bandages. A woman's voice crackled through the headset, controlled and calm. "We have a penetrating injury. Secondary collapse. You're the only trauma nurse within range with prior MASCAS experience." Ilara swallowed. Her mouth tasted like dust and memory. MASCAS. She knew that word the way some people knew prayers. The helicopter banked hard. Below them, a dry lake bed flashed white, then vanished. The scene snapped backward in her mind. 3 years earlier, St. Bridget's Medical Center, night shift. The ER had been overflowing when the bus accident came in. Screams. Sirens. Blood everywhere. Ilara moved without thinking, a quiet gravity pulling chaos into order around her. She'd found a rhythm inside the noise, a place where fear couldn't reach her hands. But when it was over, when the last patient was stabilized and the floor finally stopped shaking, she'd collapsed in the supply room and cried until morning. The hospital praised her publicly. Privately they cut her hours. Then her benefits. Then her job. Useful until she wasn't. The helicopter slammed down near a cluster of vehicles hidden under camouflage netting. Men ran. Someone shouted coordinates. Ilara jumped out before the rotors fully slowed, boots skidding on gravel. A stretcher appeared. The patient was young, face gray, eyes half open. A uniform she didn't recognize. Blood soaked through his side despite layers of gauze. Ilara's world narrowed to color and pressure and breath. She pressed, assessed, ordered with a voice that surprised everyone, including herself. "Scissors." "No. He's bleeding internally." The medic hesitated. "She didn't move," she said, and he did. Minutes blurred. She worked by feel, by instinct, by a promise she'd made to herself long ago. If I'm here I don't fail. The bleeding slowed. The patient's breathing steadied. A quiet ripple moved through the team. Relief. The woman on the headset exhaled. "Good work, Quinn," she said. "You just saved an asset." Ilara looked up, hands slick, heart pounding. "Asset?" she repeated. There was a pause. Long enough to matter. "You were selected," the voice said carefully. "Because of something you did before you ever wore scrubs." The words hit harder than the rotors. Before she could ask, the helicopters lifted again. As the desert fell away, Ilara felt the old weight settle back onto her hands. The weight of secrets she thought she'd buried. And for the first time she understood, being fired wasn't the end. It was a recall. Ilara sat strapped to the bench as the helicopter thundered forward, the desert racing beneath them like a film sped too fast. No one spoke. The patient was stabilized and gone, lifted into another bird, flown toward lights she couldn't see. Her hands were clean now, scrubbed with antiseptic wipes that smelled like lemon and metal. Clean hands always made room for dirty thoughts. "Before you ever wore scrubs," the phrase echoed, tapping a locked door in her mind. She stared at her knuckles until the tremor faded. She had learned long ago that fear feeds on attention. Starve it and it shrinks. They landed at dusk near a decommissioned airstrip outside Red Basin, a place so forgotten it barely existed on maps. Floodlights snapped on, bleaching the ground white. Ilara was guided into a low concrete building with no windows and a single American flag painted on the wall. Faded, chipped, stubborn. Inside, a woman waited. She wore civilian clothes but stood like command. Silver hair cut short. Eyes sharp enough to make Ilara straighten without knowing why. "Ilara Quinn," she said, not asking. "I'm Maribel Shaw." She gestured to a chair. "Sit." Maribel didn't waste words. "You were fired today," she said. "Yes," Ilara replied. "Your car was repossessed last week." Ilara stiffened. "You're stalking me?" Maribel's mouth tilted. "We're assessing you." She slid a thin folder across the table. Ilara didn't open it. She didn't need to. She knew what wouldn't be there. "You're missing a line," Ilara said quietly. Maribel nodded once. "Yes. The 6 months you never listed." The room felt smaller. Ilara leaned back, crossing her arms, building walls she hadn't needed in years. "That time doesn't exist," she said. "It does to us," Maribel replied. "And to the people who walked out alive." The memory broke through like glass. Kandahar province. Dust so fine it lived in your lungs. A convoy hit. Screams and languages she barely understood. Ilara wasn't a nurse then, not officially. She was a volunteer with a medical NGO that didn't ask too many questions. When the clinic was overrun, when the surgeon was killed, she became the hands. She learned fast or people died. She learned to make choices that followed her into sleep. When it ended, she came home and erased it. Nursing school. Clean lines. A life that made sense on paper. You were 18, Maribel said, softer now. You stabilized 23 casualties in 40 minutes. No equipment. No backup. You didn't freeze. Ilara's jaw tightened. I froze later. Maribel nodded. Most do. A door opened. The young soldier Ilara had saved was wheeled in, pale but breathing. His eyes found her. Relief flickered. That's her, he said hoarsely. She didn't quit. Ilara looked away. Praise had always felt like a trap. Maribel stood. We need someone who doesn't quit when institutions do, she said. Hospitals cut budgets. We don't. She paused. You're not being recruited. You're being reinstated. Ilara laughed once, sharp and humorless. I don't belong to you. No, Maribel agreed. You belong to the work. Outside the night cooled. The helicopters waited, engines ticking like restrained animals. Ilara walked to the doorway and looked at the dark horizon. She thought of the letter in the dirt, the way the hospital doors had closed. She thought of all the times she'd held the line while others stepped back. The pattern was suddenly clear. Being underestimated wasn't an accident. It was camouflage. She turned back. What happens if I say no? Maribel met her gaze. Then tomorrow looks a lot like today. Ilara exhaled. The answer had been with her all along. Then don't call me an asset, she said. Call me what I am. Maribel smiled. Nurse. The helicopters roared to life. They moved her fast, like hesitation was a luxury no one could afford. Ilara was issued a duffel, plain, heavy, final. Inside were boots that fit without measuring, fatigues without rank, and a medical kit so compact it felt like a dare. She changed in a concrete room that smelled of bleach and old rain. When she laced the boots, her hands stopped shaking. Muscle memory clicked into place, a forgotten language returning fluently. Outside, engines hummed. The night pressed close, cool and watchful. Maribel walked beside her across the tarmac. You won't wear insignia, she said. You won't be photographed. You won't be thanked in public. Ilara adjusted the strap on her kit. I'm used to that. Maribel glanced at her. This will be worse. Ilara nodded. Then let's be precise. Inside the transport, the lights were low. Faces emerged and vanished with the sway of the aircraft. A man across from her offered a canteen. She took it. Their fingers didn't touch. He spoke without looking at her. Name's Rook, he said. I carry people when they can't carry themselves. Ilara drank. Then we'll get along. A few seats down, someone snorted. The sound held relief. The briefing was short and sharp, projected onto the bulkhead. A map. A compound carved into rock. Hostiles marked in red. Civilians in gray. We go quiet, Maribel said over the headset. Extraction window is thin. If it closes, it closes. And the wounded? Ilara asked. Maribel didn't hesitate. You decide. That answer settled in Ilara's chest, heavy but honest. She watched the map until it burned into her mind. There was a thread there, a hidden pattern of exits and choke points. She traced it with her eyes, already planning where she would kneel, where she would brace, where blood would pool if things went wrong. The aircraft banked. Someone crossed themselves. Someone else checked a magazine. Ilara closed her eyes and counted breaths. 4 in. 6 out. Fear obeyed structure. They landed miles from the target, disembarking into darkness that smelled of wet stone. The team moved like a single organism, silent and efficient. Ilara stayed in the middle, protected but not coddled. She appreciated that. Halfway in, a low pop cracked the quiet. Then another. Rook swore softly. A figure went down ahead. Ilara was already moving. She slid to the ground, hands working before permission could catch up. Blood was bright even in the dark. She packed, pressed, whispered nonsense meant to keep the man anchored. He squeezed her wrist once. Signal received, they pushed on. The compound loomed, angular and wrong against the night. A breach. Shouts. Chaos. The rhythm broke, then reformed. Ilara worked in pockets of light, headlamp on, headlamp off, time stretching and snapping. A woman with shrapnel in her leg. A boy shaking with shock. A guard bleeding out, eyes wide with surprise. Ilara made choices. Some lived. Some didn't. Each decision etched itself somewhere permanent. Then the call came, urgent, sharp. We're compromised. Window closing. Ilara looked at the boy. He clutched her sleeve. She felt the old trigger pull, Abandonment, loud and familiar. She met Maribel's eyes across the chaos. No words. Just trust or the lack of it. 2 minutes, Elara said. I can give you 2. Maribel nodded. You have 90 seconds. Elara worked like the clock had teeth. When the extraction bird lifted, she was last aboard, breath-tearing, kit lighter than before. The ground fell away. The boy slept against Rook's chest, alive. Elara leaned back and closed her eyes. In the quiet after, something inside her shifted, not healed, not broken. Aligned. As dawn crept along the horizon, Elara realized the truth she'd been avoiding. She hadn't been fired from her life. She'd been cleared for it. And whatever came next would demand everything she was willing to give. The aircraft touched down just after dawn, the sky pale and bruised like skin after a long night of blows. Elara stepped onto the tarmac with legs that felt borrowed. The boy was carried away toward a waiting ambulance, his breathing steady, his hand still curled as if it expected hers to return. Rook didn't look back. He never did. The habit kept him alive. Elara watched until the doors closed, then turned toward the low building at the edge of the strip. The flag on the wall inside was newer here. Still imperfect. Still trying. She was debriefed alone. No praise. No questions that mattered. A recorder clicked on, captured times and measurements, then clicked off. When it ended, Maribel stood and said, "You did well." It sounded like a fact, not a gift. Elara nodded. Her chest felt hollow, a familiar ache she'd learned to live around. Being useful always came with a bill. They gave her a room with a narrow bed and a single window facing nothing. She showered until the water ran cold, scrubbing dust from her hair, blood from the lines in her palms. When she lay down, sleep refused her. Instead, images came in hard flashes. The guard's eyes, the woman's scream, the boy's grip tightening. Elara pressed her forearm across her face and breathed through it. 4 in. 6 out. Fear obeyed structure. Guilt did not. Hours later, a knock. Maribel entered with a tablet. "We have another," she said. Elara sat up. "Already?" "Always," Maribel replied. "This one's different." The footage showed a wildfire ripping through a mountain town, smoke boiling black against a blue sky. Sirens threaded through the roar. A hospital evacuation gone wrong. Power out. ICU patients trapped. Elara leaned forward, already counting resources that weren't there. "You want me on the ground?" she said. "I want you deciding," Maribel answered. "Local command is fractured. They need a spine." They flew low over flames that chewed the hillsides like hungry animals. On the ground, chaos looked loud even when it was silent. Ash drifting, people running with purpose and without it. Elara moved through the smoke with a scarf over her mouth, boots slipping on wet grass. She found a nurse sobbing behind a gurney and handed her a task small enough to hold. She found a doctor frozen at a door and said his name until he remembered it. When the generator died, Elara improvised. When the stairwell filled with smoke, she rerouted. When time ran out, she chose. A man in a wheelchair grabbed her sleeve. "My wife," he said. "She can't breathe." Elara followed him to a room where a woman lay gasping, eyes pleading. The last oxygen tank sat empty. Outside, a helicopter hovered, room for one more patient. Elara felt the familiar pull, abandonment tugging one way, duty the other. She closed her eyes for a single breath and made the call. The helicopter lifted with the woman aboard. The man watched it go, then turned to Elara with a face carved from loss. He didn't shout. That was worse. By nightfall, the fire was contained. The town was quieter, not healed. Elara washed ash from her arms in a sink that rattled and leaked. When she stepped outside, Rook waited, helmet under his arm. "You okay?" he asked. Elara considered lying. "I did what I could." Rook nodded. "That's the job." She met his eyes. "That's the cost." Back at the strip, Maribel handed her a new badge. No name, no rank. Just a symbol she didn't recognize. "You can walk away," Maribel said. "No consequences." Elara thought of the hospital doors sealing. The road home. The helicopters. The boy breathing. The man watching the sky. "There are always consequences," she said. "Walking away just chooses different ones." Maribel studied her, then tucked the badge into Elara's duffel. "Rest," she said. Elara lay down as dawn hinted again at the edges of the world. Sleep came thin and brief. When she woke, the ache was still there, but so was something else. Resolve, quiet and stubborn. Being useful would keep costing her. But now she was choosing where the bill was paid. Elara woke to rain tapping the window like impatient fingers. For a moment she didn't know where she was. Then the ache settled into place, shoulders, wrists, the space behind her eyes where decisions lived. She dressed without thinking and stepped outside. The air smelled clean, scrubbed raw by the storm. Somewhere beyond the strip, thunder rolled low and distant, a reminder that not all danger announced itself with sirens. They briefed her standing up. A city this time, Havenport, old brick and narrow alleys, docks that creaked under history. A cargo vessel had burned overnight, explosion tearing through the lower decks. Multiple casualties. One high-value detainee injured in the blast, now bleeding out. He must survive, Maribel said, voice level. He knows where the others are. Elara watched the map, the arrows, the circled routes. And the crew? She asked. Maribel didn't flinch. Secondary. The word landed like a slap. Elara felt something harden inside her. Not anger, not fear. A line. I don't do secondary, she said. Maribel met her gaze. This man has ordered deaths. So have fires, Elara replied. So have storms. I don't choose who deserves air. They moved anyway. Rain slicked the streets, reflecting blue and red into broken mirrors. Elara followed the team into the ship's belly, heat and smoke fighting the cold. The injured were everywhere, dockhands, sailors, a woman clutching her arm and whispering prayers. Elara knelt where the floor tilted, stabilizing, triaging, moving. Her voice cut through the chaos, calm as a held breath. They found the detainee in a locked compartment, shrapnel in his abdomen, pulse thin. A guard blocked Elara's path. Him first, he said. Elara stepped around him. Everyone breathes first, she said, already working on the nearest sailor whose leg was mangled beyond saving. She tied, cut, pressed. The sailor screamed, then didn't. She kept going. Minutes stretched. The rain found its way inside, hissing on hot metal. The guard cursed. You're wasting time. Elara didn't look up. I'm buying it. When she reached the detainee, it was almost too late. She worked fast, efficient, detached. The man's eyes opened, sharp and afraid. He tried to speak. Elara held his gaze and shook her head. Not yet, she said softly. He lived. Barely. As they moved him out, a secondary blast rocked the deck. Someone went down hard. Elara turned back without thinking. Rook caught her arm. We're done, he said. She pulled free. We're not. The man on the deck was a firefighter, trapped, leg pinned. Elara wedged herself in, rain plastering her hair to her face. She worked blind, fingers finding purchase by feel alone. The deck groaned. Rook swore. The team covered them. Elara didn't hear the order to pull back. She heard a heartbeat and followed it. They made it out with seconds to spare. The ship sagged behind them, smoke pouring like a held breath released. On the dock, the guard rounded on her. You disobeyed, he said. Elara met his eyes. I saved lives. Maribel arrived then, rain beating on her coat. She took in the scene, the stretchers, the living, the dead. You crossed a line, she said to Elara. Elara nodded. I drew one. The fallout came fast. Raised voices behind closed doors. Words like liability and precedent. Elara sat alone, rain drying on her sleeves, waiting. She thought of the man in the wheelchair, the boy asleep, the firefighter breathing. The pattern was clear. Being useful wasn't enough. You had to be right. Maribel returned near dawn. She sat across from Elara and sighed. You're a problem, she said. Elara almost smiled. I know. Maribel slid the badge across the table. You're also the reason people live. We'll work around your line. Elara picked up the badge, felt its weight. Good, she said. Because I won't move it. Outside the rain stopped. The city breathed. Elara stood and shouldered her duffel. The work would keep coming. So would the cost. But the line she'd drawn held, thin, bright, unbreakable. And for the first time she trusted herself to keep it. The call came at dusk, when the light turned thin and metallic and made everything look like it could break. Elara was cleaning her kit, counting gauze, rethreading sutures, when Maribel stopped in the doorway. She didn't speak right away. That was how Elara knew this one would leave a mark. Dry Creek, Maribel said finally. Your town. Elara's hands paused mid-motion. Dry Creek wasn't a place people called about. It barely registered on weather maps. What happened? She asked, already standing. A tanker overturned on Route 19, Maribel said. Chemical spill. Multi-vehicle pileup. Fire spread fast. She held Elara's eyes. St. Bridget's was the nearest trauma center. The room narrowed. Sound thinned. Elara saw the parking lot, the copper sky, the doors sealing behind her. Casualties. Unknown, Maribel said. But there's a complication. They flew hard and low, rotors chopping the air like they were angry at it. From the window, Ilara saw smoke rising where the road cut through scrub, black, oily wrong. Sirens converged too late. The helicopter landed on a stretch of asphalt scorched and buckled. Ilara jumped before it fully settled. The smell hit her first, burned rubber, chemicals, something sweet that turned her stomach. The scene was chaos with a familiar face. St. Brigid's logo on a triage tent. Nurses she knew running with eyes too wide. A doctor shouting orders that contradicted each other. Ilara moved through it like water finding a crack. She grabbed a clipboard, tore off the top sheet, started again. Listen, she said, voice carrying. We sort by breathing, bleeding, then burns. Follow me. They did. Relief flickered. Structure returned. Then she saw Hannah Price. Hannah was slumped against an ambulance, hair singed, face streaked with soot. She trained Ilara years ago, taught her how to place a line with shaking hands. Their eyes met. Hannah smiled, small and tired. Guess you couldn't stay away, she said. Ilara knelt. Where are you hurt? Hannah shrugged. Just smoke. I'll be fine. Ilara's fingers found the truth before words did, crackling under the skin, a rattle in the chest Hannah was trying to hide. Ilara's throat tightened. You need oxygen, she said. Hannah shook her head. Give it to the kids. A shout cut through them. Another explosion. The tanker shifted, leaking. Wind changed. People ran. Ilara turned to direct a move, barking orders, pushing the line back. When she turned again, Hannah was on the ground. They worked on her together, hands moving in desperate harmony. Bagging. Compressing. Counting. Ilara felt time bend and stretch, refusing to move forward. Hannah's eyes fluttered open once. She squeezed Ilara's wrist. You did good, she whispered. The monitor went flat. For a second, the world held its breath. Then noise rushed back in, cruel and loud. Ilara didn't cry. She finished the count, called it, closed Hannah's eyes with fingers that knew the ritual too well. Around them, people kept living. That was the insult and the mercy. Later, when the fire was out and the wounded moved, Ilara stood alone at the edge of the road. The desert was quiet again, pretending nothing had happened. Maribel approached, stopped beside her. I'm sorry, she said. It sounded inadequate. It was. Ilara stared at the asphalt where Hannah had fallen. If I'd been here, she said. Maribel didn't interrupt. I was fired, Ilara finished. The words tasted bitter. I was walking home. Maribel nodded once. Institutions fail, she said. People don't always. Ilara looked at the triage tent, the nurses packing up, the place she'd given years to without question. Something old and heavy loosened in her chest. Not forgiveness, not peace. Clarity. She understood now why the work kept finding her, why the helicopters had called her name. It wasn't to make things fair. It was to make them count. She turned to Maribel. Next time, she said, voice steady, we go faster. Maribel met her gaze. Next time, she said, we go together. The night closed in, cool and indifferent. Ilara shouldered her kit. Loss walked with her, but it no longer led. She stepped forward anyway. The mountain shook like it had finally decided to shrug them off. Ilara felt it through her boots first, a deep, rolling shudder that turned balance into a suggestion. Rocks clattered down the slope, bouncing like thrown bones. Someone shouted, sharp and panicked. The night air filled with dust and the smell of torn earth. Avalanche, her mind supplied calmly, the way it always did when things went bad. Not snow, stone. Worse. They were in Grey Knife Pass, hours from the nearest town, responding to a collapsed mining tunnel that wasn't supposed to exist. Illegal operation. Desperate men. A call that had come through 3 layers of deniability. Maribel hadn't smiled when she briefed it. This one's buried, she'd said. And it doesn't want to be found. Now the mountain answered. Move. Move. Rook shouted, shoving a man clear as a slab of rock punched into the ground where he'd been standing. The slope above them gave way in a grinding roar. Ilara dropped, instinct screaming, covering her head as debris rained down. The world became noise and pressure and dark. When it stopped, silence rushed in, thick, stunned. Ilara, Rook said close. You hit. She flexed fingers, toes. Pain flared, manageable. I'm good, she said. Who's not? They found 3. 2 breathing. 1 not. Ilara worked fast, hands steady even as the ground kept whispering threats. She stabilized a crushed chest, taped a wound that wouldn't stop weeping. She talked the injured into staying with her, nonsense and truth braided tight. Then the radio crackled.